Wonderful. So the next presentation is Tom Heilandt, the Codex Secretariat from WHO.
I had hoped to give it in Rome. Unfortunately, that is not possible, so I have recorded it for you. I'll tell you a little bit more about Codex and food safety in the changing times of COVID and food systems transformation, and also a bit about what we're doing or what we're hoping to do on probiotics. Now, food safety is really everyone's business. Everybody in the food supply chain should know about it, from the producer to the consumer. That's also why the United Nations some years back created a World Food Safety Day, which we're celebrating every year on 7th June. Why all that? Well, WHO has estimated that every year 600 million, there are 600 million foodborne illnesses every year and 420,000 deaths. Many of those children under 5. That is a lot, that is too many. Those are, in most cases, preventable illnesses and preventable deaths. The World Bank has estimated that the cost of unsafe food for low and middle income countries is 110 billion US dollars per year. That is also a lot, and that is a lot of money that could have been better used on other issues in the countries like infrastructure and so on. So there's a lot to be done still to improve food safety all over the world. It is everyone's business. Now, food is a complex commodity. We want it to be available and affordable. We want it to be safe, nutritious, tasty. We want it to keep us healthy and make us healthy. We want it to be sustainably produced and give a fair income for producers. So that's quite a lot of different demands that we have on food, which explains also the diversity of standards, the diversity of work that is being done surrounding food. Our mandate is to protect the consumer's health and ensure fair practices in the food trade. Finally, to coordinate all food standards work done by international governmental and non-governmental organizations. We have been doing this since 1963, since we were founded by FAO and WHO, covering all foods and their production, setting standards, and bringing people together to build international networks. Some facts about Codex: 180 plus 1 members. We are 100% member driven. That's important for later when we're talking about probiotics. It's not something that is being dreamt up in the Secretariat. The proposals have to come from members and they have to be agreed by members. We're based on science. We're working very strongly on the values: consensus building, transparency, inclusiveness, collaboration, because we believe that it is better to come to standards that are reached by consensus than to have voting, which is possible, but we find it divisive. So we're striving always to find a consensus on our work. Once we've done that, this leads to harmonization of rules and easier trade in the world. Our standards are voluntary, are recommendations to governments, but they are referenced in the WTO SPS agreement and have also been used in TBT disputes. We work in accordance with a 5-year strategic plan. We just started one in 2020, the new one, where you can see there at the bottom, concentrating on setting the needed standards, using science, increase impact of our standards through raising awareness about them, to facilitate participation of all members, and to improve our work methods continuously. Here you see the overall structure of Codex Alimentarius, headed by the Commission that takes the final decision on everything, which is held by an executive committee. On the left side, you see the so-called horizontal or general committees dealing with topics which affect all foods, such as pesticide residues, food hygiene, food additives, contaminants, labeling, and so on. In the middle, you see the vertical or commodity committees, which are dealing with one food group, like fats and oils, fish and fishery products, or fresh fruit and vegetables, for example. On the right side, you can see our task forces, which are groups that have been formed for one specific purpose, and when that is done, the groups disappear, get dissolved. At the moment, we have one group active, which is the important group on antimicrobial resistance. At the bottom, you see our regional coordinating committees, which help to bring countries to the regions, and they also have the right to set regional standards. Now, a piece of Lego doesn't really look like anything, but standards took us to the moon and back and will take us to Mars. They keep our planes in the air and our cars on the road and our food safe, so that we never think about it. This replica of the Saturn V rocket has 1,969 pieces, which I assume was intentionally because of 1969 and the first moon landing. When you're looking at it, at best, Codex standards fit together also like pieces of a Lego set. Pesticides help to produce food, and residue limits make sure that the food is safe. Hygiene defines how to avoid biological contamination. Other codes help to avoid chemical or physical contamination. Additives help production and are safe when they're used within the limits that are set by the Codex Alimentarius Commission. So there's a lot today that works better than ever before in food, but there's also a lot that will not work forever. And a lot is not sustainable, and overall the work is never done. Some drivers for change in our work. The pandemic, certainly we talk a little bit more about that. Climate change, innovations in food science and technology, water scarcity, consumer concerns and behavior, the United Nations oriented towards the Sustainable Development Goals, and the upcoming UN Food Systems Summit. You can see what is intended in that summit on this slide. I have no time to go into that in any detail, but if you look at the action areas, we have nourish all people, boost nature-based solutions of production, advance equitable livelihoods, build resilience to vulnerabilities. We don't have food safety as such in there, which we had hoped. It's not explicitly mentioned, but yet it is essential, because if it is not safe, it's not really food, and it will not nourish anyone but make people sick. So food systems transformation is needed, but the food needs to be safe. And we make that point wherever we go. And we will, of course, actively work with the people that are working in the nourish action area, because we think it's important that if you change something in the system, you should watch what else might change and what might make the food unsafe, especially when you're talking about things like reuse of water, circular economy, and so on. The pandemic. Codex had to transform because of our system. Each of our meetings is hosted by a host government in a different country and chaired by a chairperson from that country. And that country also provides the finances for the interpretation of that meeting. We had in 2018-19, we had physical meetings on 148 days in 20 different countries. Now, you can imagine what 2020 then looked like. 2020, we had physical meetings on 5 days. We had some formal virtual meetings because we were not quite sure yet how to go about that on 13 days, and informal meetings virtually on 10 days. So we were only able to hold our executive committee and the commission. We move now to 2021. we have formal virtual meetings on 90 days, informal meetings on 50 days. So all these meetings that you see down there have been held or will still be held this year. Now, what's good about that? Well, first of all, what's good about it is that our work continues, that we just did not stop. But what's also good about it, we have more countries and more delegates participating. If we're thinking about our strategic plan, one of our goals was that we want everybody who wants to participate could participate. Now, virtually, this is easier than traveling. We have some people who attend on some days or only some hours of the meeting. Overall, there's less travel, which is also good for the planet. On the negative side, what we get is less overall engagement of people, because if you imagine, normally people would be there 24 hours. Everybody would be out of their normal work life and would be totally committed to the Codex meeting. This way, virtual meetings, we get like 3 hours per day or so of people, and that is sometimes not enough. We get less interaction and networking, we get no informal side or coffee meetings, and it's more difficult, we find, to reach a consensus on some critical issues. It's also not sustainable because of time zones. Certain time zones are continuously disadvantaged by the timing that we usually use for the meetings, which is like 12 to 3 or so. This is very bad for Australia and the Pacific, or in some areas on the west coast of the United States or Latin America. It is also not sustainable because of the workload for the Secretariat, because we noted that for the virtual meetings, we need roughly 30% more work for each meeting, but we don't have 30% more staff. So we hope eventually to be able to return partially to physical meetings. We don't know at this moment when this will be the case. There's a lot of uncertainty. Now, let me close and come to Codex and probiotics. As I said before, this is handled by the CCNFSDU. This is our Codex Committee on Nutrition and Food for Special Dietary Uses. And the 42nd session will meet this year, also in virtual format. The last session of that committee, the 41st session, was held in 2019, and discussions were split on work on probiotics. We had a proposal from Argentina to develop a harmonized international framework or guidelines for probiotics in foods and dietary supplements. This should be including definitions, minimum characterization requirements, safety criteria, quality and labeling criteria. There was support for that. It was said that the science exists in FAO and WHO, but there is a need for regulatory harmonization. High-level guidance is needed in the world. There was opposition. People were saying, well, many provisions are already addressed in horizontal Codex standards and guidelines. The work done by FAO and WHO on definitions is enough, and there are no trade issues at this moment. So you see from this a little bit how the system works. There's a proposal made, and from my own, let's say, if I as a consumer had to talk, I would say, well, probably there is some use for harmonization, certainly on the labeling front of probiotics, because there I find whatever is happening with different yogurts, different this, different that, I find that quite confusing. So I think a lot could be done there, definitely in the labeling. But on the other hand, it's not me who decides that. It's the member states. And the member states will do so based on a proposal. This will go into the meeting, be discussed, and then probably there will be a revised proposal. And this is what was the conclusion from 2019. A new proposal is now expected by Argentina and Malaysia, explaining better the need for a Codex text. Because you have to think about it. Developing a Codex text is not cheap. It takes some years, on average 3 to 4 years. It engages a lot of people, scientists, delegates, and costs a lot of meeting time. So it should only be done if it is really necessary. So we have a process that each new proposal needs to go through. And until it has not done so, we will not start the work. So what is going to happen this time? We're expecting this new proposal to come in, and it will be considered by a working group for this committee, for the CCNFSDU, on the priorities of that committee. And then hopefully at the end of that committee, which should be late November, we would be knowing how this work will be taken forward. Sometimes we've seen the situation that there was a lot of support first for work. For example, over the last couple of years, we had a proposal for a definition on biofortification, and that was taken up. There was a lot of lobbying about it. There were people going to each of our Codex committees and saying that would be a useful definition to have. On the other hand, there was never a clear place for that definition. Why do we need that definition? So after some years of discussion and spending lots of time on it, there was no consensus, and there was also the feeling, well, what do we do with that definition, even if we manage to finish it? And the work was discontinued, which is something that does not happen very often, but it's always very unsatisfactory. And I would not wish the same to happen for probiotics, and this is why it is good that a bit more time is taken also to develop a good project before moving into the work. So watch this space. We're probably going to be able to say more about that at your next year's meeting. Now, Codex in 2022 and beyond, how do I see it? I do not see that we're going to have a lot of physical meetings in 2022. Virtual meetings will be the rule still. Physical meetings will be the exception. We will work on a lot of new tasks coming from our members. I described the process. Also, FAO and WHO have prepared a paper for the Commission on new types of food, food from insects, edible insects, lab-grown meat, nanotechnology. A lot of new topics are being brought to Codex, so eventually this will lead to new work. Overall, we are going to continue to learn, adapt, and invent, while certainly attempting to stay true to our values in the system and to find an international consensus on important topics related to food safety and fair practices in the food trade. That brings me to the end. Thanks a lot for your attention, and if you have questions, please stay in touch. Please visit our website, which contains all information about our work, or send us an email at codex@fao.org. Thanks a lot. I wish you a great meeting and look forward to seeing you sometime in the future in person. Bye-bye.